Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we worked through some technical difficulties. Are all the hosting privileges set to what we need, Dr. Rudolph?
It will be in a second, but we're ready to go. So we should be fine.
Okay, perfect. Then, I lost my. At 6:42, we will call to order this meeting of the Mountain View Wisconsin School District Board of Trustees, the special meeting. And we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. As you join.
No problem.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And we will move on now to roll call. You'll have to unmute yourselves, trustees, as I just learned.
Jose Gutierrez Jr.
Devin Conley.
Ellen Wheeler.
Laura Blakely and Tamara Wilson, let the record reflect that all 5 trustees are present, and we'll move on now to approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve.
Go ahead, Devin.
Presented.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Conley. Thank you, Trustee Gutierrez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, on a motion moved by Trustee Conley and seconded by Trustee Gutierrez, the approval of the agenda passes unanimously. We're going to move.
Just 1 second. Spanish interpretation is available for this meeting. If you're using a Mac or PC, click on the globe at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you're on an iPhone or Android, it is in the options menu. Hay interpretación al español disponible para esta reunión. Si está usando una Mac o una PC, haga clic en el globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom. Si está en iPhone o Android, está en el menú de opciones.
Perfecto. Gracias, señor. Thank you. So we'll move on now to item 2A, the Return to Learn Progress Update. For folks who were with us last Thursday, we unfortunately ran out of time for any substantive question and answer session from trustees or trustee follow-up comments. So we decided it was pertinent to hold this special session to continue that conversation and also get sufficient public feedback. So we're going to do so. Dr. Rudolph will be starting us off with a brief overview of some of the data slides from the survey information we collected. And then we'll go into the Q&A from the trustees. Then we'll move on to community comments, which we're going to allot up to 30 minutes for. And then we'll finish that off with trustee comments on where we're at. And I'll hand this over to Dr. Rudolph. Thank you, everyone, for your patience as we get this going.
Just so quick, just so I'm not going over the full deck, which has been posted and which I reviewed last time. Just want to sort of show some of the numbers here that informed our decision. So we said in the outset that anyone who did not respond to our survey will be automatically placed into distance learning. 47% of our parents actually requested for distance learning, with 52% requesting to be in hybrid. Obviously, the 450 is more than the 4,300 students that we have, which tips us over to 50%. Also, and this is as of Saturday of last week, we've since received more we have received more parents requesting for new placements, primarily parents requesting to move from blended over to hybrid. In addition to that, our phase 1 reopening that we originally talked about, preschool, as of today, we have no preschool teachers who are willing to return. In addition to that, you can see for staff, for TK, it's 18 to 12. And then for first grade, you have 12 to 16. And then for our SAI, which are our special education classes, you have 9 teachers who are willing to return with 1 who isn't. Unfortunately, though, we don't have any IAs who are willing to return for the SAI class, which also poses a slight problem for us. If we look at the full staff, though, and you go beyond the first phase of reopening, what you see and what I mentioned before is that there are 17 teachers who stated that regardless of the outcome, they're going to request leave, or they have indicated that. I want to remind everyone that we've had 54, at least at last count, there were 54 teachers who want to go through the interactive process, which essentially expresses their concern for coming back under the hybrid setting. With that said, though, across the board for teachers, what you see is 54% of all teachers, and this is K through 8, are willing to return, and 46% of all teachers stated that they have some type of concern. And it's not, their concern is that they would rather stay in distance learning until there are other variables that come into play. So we move a little bit further and we start looking at the special education, which has been a conversation for us. And what we see is across the full spectrum, 60% of our teachers are willing to return. So it's flipped a little bit, whereas 40% of our teachers are concerned about coming.
You close it now.
Shelley, can we make sure that everybody gets muted again?
Yes.
For teachers on special assignment, these are teachers who actually they interact with the most group of teachers. So these are RTI teachers, these are coaches, these are individuals who, they're on special assignment for one reason or another. 62% of them stated that they were uncomfortable returning currently. And so that sort of reviews some of the data that was there, and that doesn't include the anecdotal data that we've had. So I think there's a couple of things I'll say just real quick before we go into the larger conversation. So we recognize that one of our major concerns is that we need to make sure that we are supporting students, and we've identified a couple, obviously, big obstacles across the board. The first one is that there are some special populations that we need to address. We have about 130 students who are McKinney-Vento, and we've obviously started operating for McKinney-Vento or homeless students. We have some programs where we need to ramp it up a little bit higher. We have 65 students who are classified as newcomers, most of them being at the primary age, but there are 5 that are in middle school. There are about 100 SAI students, students who mild mod, or they are students of autism, or these are the students who are in a medically fragile class. And then there are about 144 students who have a 504, which is protected under the Individuals with Students with Disabilities Act, IDEA, that we are taking into consideration. So those students are going to have a priority in terms of us setting up support structures to allow them to come in. So and we don't have the particulars of what that looks just yet, but we do sort of have sort of a back of the napkin kind of number of what it would take, what it would cost to bring all of those students in at any given time. We also are looking into internet. We've ran some numbers across the board and what it would take. There are sort of 3 different paths. One path that we're currently on, which is purchasing hotspots. The second path is to essentially us becoming our own sort of internet provider and making sure, and I'm not going to go into the particulars of it, but making sure that all of our devices can actually access the materials and access the internet. And then the last one is to create Wi-Fi in the full community, which would require a lot of approval. It would require approval from the city because we would have to post multiple access points throughout the city. And in order to blanket the whole city, it's a pretty large endeavor. But each one has its pros and cons, but we are looking at what the price points of those are, and we'll be bringing that back. So we have internet, we have at-risk groups, And then the next thing is that we also recognize that we need more subs. So we are going to hold a sub fair to address that issue. Obviously, when I said 17 teachers, if we reopened, would be willing to take leave, but we don't have enough subs in order for us to keep going. And subs is really an issue right now just across the board. So we're going to have a sub fair to see if we can capture some more subs. And then the final thing is that with my recommendation of us staying in distance learning for a considerable amount of time, we are going to do the following items to sort of understand what improvements we can make with our distance learning platform. I will say ours is a lot more robust than what anybody else's is. And, you know, we really are making sure that we did not have some of the concerns that were brought up earlier this year. So with that, we are currently doing analysis of thought exchange. We will be reaching back out to our focus groups who were instrumental in helping us craft our return to learn plan and finding out what are the pluses and minuses across the board. We also will be meeting with our teachers as well as our classified employees to talk about what their individual concerns are. And I want to point out when we say this, we'll have secretaries, clerks in one group, at-risk SCAFs in another group, and IAs in a different group, primarily because each of their functions are totally different. So it doesn't make sense to pull the reopening task force back in. And similar to teachers, we'll bring in elementary teachers as well as middle school teachers. And then we'll also look at our teachers on special assignment, which are mainly our RTI teachers, because each group interacts in a different way with people. And then of course, we'll also be meeting with our administrators to talk about what changes we can make in the distance learning format. So those right there are sort of the things that we're working on behind the scenes to sort of keep this kind of going across the board. And I turn it over to the trustees now so that you can deliberate this further.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph, for that quick overview of the presentation that was given last Thursday. We're going to open it up now to trustee questions. And after trustee questions, there will be a 30-minute public comment period, followed by trustee follow-up comments on the whole process. So right now we'll start off with trustee questions. And I'd like to just start with a framing question. So is this a conversation that's leading to a vote, Dr. Rudolph, or are you providing us with an update since we've already voted to close the schools? I think I'd like some clarification on that, and I think the public would as well.
Yep. And I mean, so it's two ways that the board can take this. So in theory, technically, the board has already taken action to keep the schools closed. And you voted on that earlier and you didn't put an end date, right? So in theory, technically, you don't have to revote or vote to reopen. You also, I want to say in a special meeting, and it's actually the last meeting in our boardroom, I think it was either March or April or May, you also voted that during the pandemic that you would give me the ability to open and close schools based off of sort of what I saw. So, I mean, in theory, those two things actually do not require for you to take another action. I will also say that most boards are voting to reopen. They're not voting on a continuation. Now, with that said, there is value in the board voting on approving a plan to stay sort of in distance learning until January. So it's really up to the board's discretion about which way that you want to go.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And my second question is, what process in any type of phased opening once we get there, what process do we have in working with the unions? So the board can't unilaterally make decisions and force people to come in. Is that correct? And could you briefly describe that process?
So, I mean, in theory, yes, you could unilaterally vote to open. What you can't do, though, is force the union to come in, right? And so what the preferable approach to this would be that you have an MOU in place that has already identified all the working conditions that are in place. So for instance, one of the conditions, one of the concerns that we've heard, and I'm not talking about in negotiation, I'm just talking about a concern just in general, is that, we have an hour-long break, and I think a parent's even written in about this. We have an hour-long break for lunch, and, it would make sense to continue to have that hour-long break. Now, knowing that teachers have to have 30 minutes and students, typically have around 30 minutes, normally what happens is that the kids go out and you have all of the kids, sort of on the playground, and you have a couple of noon supervisors sort of providing coverage. Well, now you can't have kids crossing sort of areas or cohorts, right? So they have to stay within their confined area. And knowing that kids have to stay within their confined area means that you need to increase the amount of supervision. And so increasing the amount of supervision means that you need more people. And so you either try to hire as many hourly people as possible, or you have to find a way to ask the teachers to supervise lunch during that time. So I guess what I'm pointing out is that's where the working condition issue comes in. There are also working condition issues, even though Senate Bill 820 allows for us to do live streaming, there is a working condition about what this live streaming with kids in the classroom look like. And Senate Bill 820 is new. So even if a district negotiated an MOU, earlier in the summer, 820 wasn't in place. And so teachers you couldn't require a teacher to record a classroom. Whereas in this instance, Senate Bill 820 allows you to have teachers stream from the classroom. But requiring that means that you have to settle what the working conditions are across the board. And so the first step for us is to resolve the working conditions based off of the direction of the board and sort of the things that the board is looking at. And then from there, it's a lot easier to reopen because both sides have sort of agreed to it. And so that's the traditional way that it takes place. And there's a lot of other factors. And you have to do that again with CSEA, which is our other union, to make sure. Otherwise, what could end up happening is a labor strike. And then you just end up in court, and you're still, instead of having any distance learning, what you would be is sort of a work stoppage across the board.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. We'll open it up to other trustees. Trustee Gutierrez, I see you're unmuted. Oh, Trustee Conley had her hand raised though.
That's all good.
Okay. Trustee Conley.
Okay. So something that we talked about in the past when we were looking at schools in areas that have reopened and have managed to not do this fluctuating open, close as much. I think we had talked about Germany as an example, and it had a 1% positivity rate, or was it less than 1%?
Less than 1.
Less than 1% positivity rate.
Mm-hmm.
And just to clarify for the public, are the employees through Beyond the Bell, Right at School, the YMCA, or even outside organizations like AYSO, which is mostly volunteers, MBLL, are those unionized employees?
They are not. So Beyond the Bell are hourly employees. And then obviously YMCA and Right at Schools are, they're their own entity within themselves. So they operate outside the district through a partnership, or maybe they're renting space or some other arrangement across the board.
Okay. Something that came up when I listened in on the community update on Friday. A lot of people called in about trying to, if we're going to be in distance learning for a longer amount of time, trying to arrange some sort of socially distanced activity for children after school, outside of school, so that they, in terms of like mental health, they had an opportunity to interact with each other. And I believe you spoke some about a partnership with the city, possibly. I'm wondering if you could speak on that a little bit now.
Yep. So a couple of things here. So first is the partnership with the city, looking to see what type of after school or activities we could do. I've also met with a local a tennis instructor who ran some camps near the district office, and had students from both MVLA as well as MVWSD in there, and has been open, and their employees actually get tested every single week. But obviously tennis is one of those sports where social distancing is afforded just because of the nature of the sport. And so we are looking at what activities we could open that would allow for that to happen. We've also talked with Living Classroom with the possibility of creating sort of these, allowing parents to come in and do sort of nature gardens. And then Rhythm and Moves, which is who does our PE program, we've also reached out to them about whether or not they would be willing to allow kids to do social distancing PE there. Our challenge will always be making sure that kids adhere to the social distancing guidelines and that we're not mixing groups, but those are opportunities that we are exploring to sort of create other ways for kids to get out and at the same time to sort of socially connect with each other.
Thank you.
Trustee Gutierrez, and then we'll go with Trustee Blakely.
Dr. Rudolph, so what's our timeline with establishing a working relationship and getting the MOU done with the union?
So we're currently in negotiations with them right now. So we have another session coming up, I think, and Tara could actually tell us what day specifically, but later on this week we have another session and then we'll keep going. So our goal, and I think even their goal, is to try and get it resolved as quickly as possible. But it's subject to availability and time frame and stuff like that. So, but we are working on getting it done as quickly as possible.
Sure. And the flip side is, even when we do get an MOU, the fact remains that we still have 7 teachers that have committed of not coming in. And so we would still need to look for long-term substitutes to cover those spots.
Yeah, I think, there are teachers who have, a justifiable reason where, they would possibly be given a medical exemption for whether it's them or whether it's their family member that lives with them that puts them at high risk. And so they've already initiated the ongoing process across the interactive process across the board. And we're looking at what documentation that they have. So yes, the 17 would create a issue for us, which is also why Tara is looking at doing a sub fair to bring more subs into the district.
And a follow-up question to that is, can you share of these 17 persons who have decided, justifiably so, not to come in, are these primarily in middle schools, or are they spread out through elementary schools, or what's the majority scene look like?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly. I don't have that data on me from the 54, but Tara, if you want to join in. So I want to be clear, there are 17 who on the survey said they would take leave. And then there are 54 who are actually going through the interactive process who have some type of concern. But Tara, if you want to chime in here, that would be great.
Sure, and I can't give too much detail, but of the people who are thinking about taking leave, it's really spread out throughout the district. It's not just concentrated in one place. Okay, and then in terms of our custodial staff as well, or our other union organization, is there a timeline for them to be able to negotiate and agree on terms? Have we started that process yet? Where are we on that?
So every employee is covered through the interactive process, regardless of the bargaining unit. CSDA, we're currently doing the exact same thing, negotiating what the MOU looks like, and then we're moving forward. And then we also have their contract coming open, full contract coming open, but that's separate to this issue. So technically they're covered, but the MOU is in progress with them too. So we're doing both at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Blakely.
Thank you. Trustee Gutierrez asked my questions about the unions, so that we're in the status, so that I also wanted to know about, is it possible to allow PTAs or the PAC Foundation at Stevenson to organize some types of extracurricular, in-person, socially distanced activities for the kids at each campus on a, a site-by-site basis?
I would say if they're doing it after school hours, and that is on them. If they're doing it during school hours, I think that's a totally different conversation across the board. So I just want to remind everybody, as part of this, in order for us to operate safely, we've signed off to the county that there are guidelines that we have to adhere to. Mm-hmm. There are testing guidelines, there are social distancing guidelines. Even right at school in the YMCA have to adhere to these particular guidelines moving forward. So yes, PTA or family or a group of individuals can definitely do something after school hours, and that's perfectly fine. Obviously, we recommend that they follow social distancing protocols. If they are doing it during the school day, then they have to, they have to work with the school principal, and then we have to make sure that it adheres to the county guidelines for distancing. And so, for instance, whereas we can do 15 to 16 to 1 in a classroom, the maximum, if you follow what they call support pod, is 14 to 2. And that 14 to 2, they have to stay with each other, right? And so you can't have adults coming in and out of that particular group. And so those restrictions or those guidelines are things that we would have to follow moving forward. But again, yes, it is possible for them to do it.
Okay, thank you. And then for support pods or some kind of limited reopening, I mean, we all acknowledge that there is a much smaller subset of our student body. Like, most kids are doing reasonably well under the circumstances. Some of them are even doing, a few are even doing better maybe than they would have in person. But there is a smaller subset, kids with IEPs, some of the language learners, that is really, really struggling with the distance environment. And I don't think it's the right thing to reopen, but I'm wondering what we can do in terms of more kinds of beyond the bell type structured pods, or limited reopening for very specifically, identified criteria of kids that are really struggling. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
So earlier I talked about those. Right now we've identified at least 4 groups. We did put those students that need to be re-engaged as possible, but we don't know what the firm number is. And so, we'll come back on this Thursday when I have our reopening meeting, we'll have more information on that. But right now, if we were to support every single homeless newcomer, SAI, and a student that has a 504, we would need to create 28 learning pods throughout the district. And that will cost the district about $70,000 a week to operate. And these are all back of the napkin sort of numbers. And that's going with the cheapest provider that we could find out of the group. If we choose another provider that costs a little bit more, then, so one of the providers is almost twice as much as another one. And so like that impacts some of the decision, but at minimum, you're looking at about a $70,000 expenditure every single week.
And in that framework, the kids would still be assigned to their teachers that they have now, but would be supervised with 2 to 14 with adults that they could ask questions and get guidance from.
Right. So just to be clear, these students are essentially sitting in a study hall sort of environment, right? There is someone who is there who's can help them with troubleshooting some particular issues. But at the same time, those individuals are still learning from the teacher in a distance setting. The only difference is that we recognize that they may need to get out of the house and be in this particular environment. It does allow, if we can negotiate an MOU that allows for teachers to voluntarily come in. It does address one of my concerns, which is, a teacher, and we've seen this happen in a couple of places. If the teacher volunteers to come in, something occurs, and the teacher decides not, like it's not safe, or if they're, if they've been exposed or something else. And so then they don't come back in. And so this would allow for some continuity for the students to stay within this particular pod. And then, the other day I was over at Montaloma, though, that pod of students sort of gets the opportunity to sort of socialize or play together in a safe environment. And so that would be allowable, but for all intents and purposes, it does not change the fact that they will still be in distance learning. The only thing it does is that they are distance learning on our sites or in one of our classrooms, not distance learning at home.
And do you think that additional support would be enough for many of the kids to help get them back to the level, that they should be on?
I think it addresses some of the major issues that have been raised. I don't think that it's a perfect solution, but I think it gets you out of the house, it gets you on a stable internet, which has been a concern. It gives you the opportunity for socialization to some degree. It does allow you the opportunity for some type of support because you have an adult there who could possibly provide support. I mean, so there are some built-in structures there that could help a student. Whether or not that's going to be the deciding factor that, pushes a kid over the top and gets them completely re-engaged, that one I don't know. But I think if you had to compare the two, that option would seem like at least a logical next step. And again, is what we've seen for, the McKinney-Vento students who are at Castro currently, that it seems to be working for them.
So I know it's expensive and money doesn't grow on trees, but we do have a healthy reserve. And I'm wondering, would we be able to absorb that expense without making significant cuts to other programs? And I'd be, in particular, I mean, this seems like the type of thing where the reason why we have reserves. And I'm wondering what impact that would have if we went ahead and moved forward on a plan like that.
Yeah, so I think I think this would be a more preferred option than, just tossing money at some other ideas to sort of work. I think it will work. I think there are some concerns that are naturally going to come up across the board. I mean, obviously, there are some parents who are paying for this and other parents who now are getting this at no cost to them. But yes, we could definitely afford it. The impact of it won't be felt until what we see next year. But right now, I think we're running pretty lean in terms of how much money we're spending. I think it's pretty affordable. We do have another $60,000 in care funding. And then there was the YMCA received a donor for homeless students that created 14 slots. So it's possible, the 70,000 is just the maximum number we figure for this group. So it is possible. Whether or not we could continue this multiple years is a totally different conversation. But definitely, if you think 700,000 between now and January, it's doable. And then obviously, if we had to extend it a little bit longer, we could absorb the cost, I guess is what I'm saying, and without having a sizable impact. I do want to point out that we are overstaffed also, and we're absorbing that cost too. So I think both of these are, I would recommend them as good expenditures of our reserves that would have some type of beneficial impact for our at-risk students.
Thank you. And you said overstaffed. What can you talk about?
So at the elementary, so typically what happens at the elementary schools, after we run the roll, we look at where we are staffed and we consolidate classes based off of that. So we actually, the teachers who should be, we have about 3 to 4 teaching positions that should be virtual teachers. And we opted because we wanted to keep every student with their class and with their, not their class and their teacher, instead of collapsing classes and dispersing kids. We're remaining overstaffed, but those teachers have been notified that, you know, they will be moved over to the virtual team when the time comes that we move to hybrid. And so we'll deal with the impact of that. But yes, we currently, because we saw a drop in enrollment, especially around kinder and preschool, especially in kinder and first grade, that we're just overstaffed across the board.
Okay.
And that's just the reality.
Thank you.
Trustee Wheeler?
Yeah, so most of my questions have been answered by other trustee questions. Specifically, I was intrigued by your back of the napkin statement, but that's been covered. One of the things you mentioned in your longer presentation, and I'd like you to talk more about it now, is the concept of how reopening right now would result in a lot of combo classes or 100% combo classes. And then I assume that means that a lot of students would be moved to a teacher that is new to them. So, and, you know, we hear from a lot of parents that one of the things that they found is most valuable is the stability of their online learning experience with the teacher that they've, you know, they've gravitated to. So will you say something about the combo classes and new teacher idea?
So we did we ran a scenario to see what would happen. So we took the data that's in the presentation doesn't show you the breakdown by grade level, right? So we took the data and parceled it out by grade level and looked at phase 1, and then and looked at, so what does it take? What's their approach? So we did this with principals as an academic exercise, just with, you know, back of the napkin, kind of quick. They spend about 2 hours working on it in a meeting. And what we noticed is that the only way to keep a student at their school, that we have to combo pretty much every single class, because you know, you look at the numbers and you assume, oh, 50% of teachers want to go to distance learning and 50% of students want to go to distance learning. But it's not 50% at every single site, and it's not a 50% on every single grade level. And so in some instances, and you have to remember the bulk of our teachers actually are at the elementary level, but middle school is a different animal to itself. So because the numbers aren't the same, in order to pull this off and keep everyone at their site, it requires for a mass comboing of all kids across the board. Distance learning will become comboed and in-person learning will become comboed. So B and C will be nothing but combos across. And so that was one of the major concerns that we had, that, you know, the sentiment that we kept hearing, both from staff, teachers, as well as from parents, is that they wanted the continuity and that they wanted to make sure that they kept their students. But by executing, by moving to stage 3, what is required is that sentiment has to be sort of ignored, or that there's a trade-off, right? You get the in-person classes, but you don't get, you can't have I mean, in some cases you may have it, right, just by luck of the draw, but for the most part, almost every single kid is going to experience some type of major change. And so that's what we originally went through. Now you know, there are some other options that we could possibly explore. But, you know, again, it was our first exercise at making this occur. And we're going to do another one coming up. Middle school is a little bit more complicated. because middle school teachers tend to teach across multiple grade levels, and they are subject specific. So by law, K through 6 can all be elementary teachers, multi-subject teachers. Let's say they teach multiple subjects. But once you hit 7th and you go up, the teacher has to have a specialized credential. For us, for middle school, we treat all of our middle school teachers the same. So all of them have a specialty that they teach. But in order to make this work, you have, let's say 10 teachers for 1,000 students, all teaching math. That requires that a math teacher has to teach multiple grade levels in order for the schedule to work based off of planning periods and course requests, right? Number of sections that are there. And so that creates another wrinkle for us. So our next exercise is to try it again with middle school to see what it looks like. But essentially you're running into the exact same problem. It's actually easier on the elementary level than it is on the middle school level, just because of the sheer number of students and the number of requests. And then the other piece of this is that unlike elementary, middle school students have to stay within their cohort, and it is teachers who have to move from class to class. And so you have yet another wrinkle that's been tossed in based off of CDE guidelines. And so that creates another logistical hurdle for us, which is why we grouped everyone based off of math class. But that cohort sort of approach means that, we have to resolve, how do you have a teacher assigned to multiple cohorts? And then once a teacher says, well, I want to stay in distance learning, there's a whole reshuffling that has to go. So it is possible that, and again, we haven't ran in the middle school scenario, but we will. It is possible that what you will see is a massive overhaul of the middle school schedule too, which is a lot worse, will probably be a lot worse than what you would see for elementary. And I say this as a former master scheduler, right? So it's just the complexities of a high school and middle school schedule are totally different than the complexities of an elementary schedule. And it's not to say that one is different. It's just by numbers, it's a totally different animal.
Thank you, Trustee Wheeler. I have a follow-up question to this. How much extra work is it for a teacher to run a combo class? I'd imagine it nearly doubles what they have to teach unless you can provide 2 teachers per combo class. So given that a lot of our teachers are already, struggling to keep up with the rigors of this distance learning and all the new tools they're having to learn and trying to connect with their kids, virtually, how much extra work is it for a teacher to prep for a combo class? So you're teaching, let's say, 2nd and 3rd grade. They're different maths, they're different ELAs, it's different social studies. If you could talk to that, I think that would be helpful.
Yep. So this is where I'm going to punt to someone else. I'm going to phone a friend because I actually was a secondary teacher. And so, to be clear, so elementary and middle school have 2 different problems. Right. Middle school, secondary teachers tend to have more students, and elementary teachers tend to have their kids, but the work changes, right? Because they have more content areas that they have to teach. So I'm actually going to ask Kathy to talk a little bit about that because I think she would be in a better position as a former elementary teacher to talk about the demands of a combo class.
Sure. And I think, Tamara, Trustee Wilson, you're correct. You're now asking a teacher to teach 2 totally separate content areas. So it's not just, and unless they have a way of departmentalizing with other members of their team, now you're planning 2 different math lessons, 2 different social studies lessons. You're looking at a whole spectrum of language arts lessons depending on where kids are. And the planning time just increases exponentially, especially then in distance learning when we're doing small groups and we're planning, then we're also now going to ask the teacher on Wednesday to be posting separate lessons for different grades. So combos are not optimal. They're not optimal for students most of the time, even when we're in regular school. Now, in some cases, they work really well, but it takes a lot of planning and forethought ahead of time to make them work. Okay. So that transition in the middle of the year, can only imagine would be really difficult.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I have 2 more questions. How many COVID cases have we had since we've been closed?
Are we talking about adults or are we talking about kids?
All of it, because all of them are exposure opportunities for transmission.
Sarah, do you have the exact numbers?
If you give me just a second, I will look at my updated numbers for you. It looks like we have had I'm so sorry. I have so many documents open. I will get it for you, and
Absolutely.
I will get it to you in just a quick second. Okay.
Okay, no problem. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Sure.
My other question is, there's been a lot of community questions about our parent survey design and comments about how they could participate and volunteer in that. What does that look like?
Yep. So I think if
Moving forward.
if we redesign the survey, I think the first step is to ask parents what they felt like was missing. And then, you just sort of go through a back and forth iterative design. What we're trying to tease out is whether or not you're willing to come back. And so we're looking for hard data from there. And so if we can tweak a question across the board, then that's what we'll do in order to get, accurate data. I don't know. Obviously we've received, I think, 3 or 4 emails saying that they would be willing to help, and they have some ideas for what types of questions we should ask. And so we'll be more than welcome to engage with those individuals. And then from there, you just keep going back and forth until you feel like you have it. And then we have to, from that point, we'll just execute it, the survey. So we did this similar, we did this earlier with the teachers union, in terms of EERB came back and said, you should really ask this particular question, which gave us a lot of input. And then, obviously the challenge is that when you work with a small group of individuals, and I'm using the teachers as an example, not everyone's aware of sort of the back and forth process that occurred. And so then we had one person in the staff town hall say, hey, you didn't ask the question this particular way. And you just have to, every time you just prepare for that. But I think working with parents to sort of understand how they perceive the questions being asked and how they believe it needs to be asked will help us to sort of answer it a little bit better. We relied on other district surveys and then some ancillary feedback that we've had in order to draft ours, but we're more than willing to take another stab at it again.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Burrell. It looks like I'll move on to Trustee Gutierrez, but Tara, it looks like you have a quick answer for my last question before we wrap
I'm
up.
so sorry. It took me a minute to look it up, but
No
we've had
worries.
a total of 5 positive cases.
Perfect, thank you. And that's without 5,200 and some odd students. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
You're
Thank you for that. Trustee Gutierrez, we're moving on to 7:30 now. I'd like to make sure we have 30 minutes at least for community comments through there, just so trustees are aware. Trustee Gutierrez.
Hey, Dr. Rudolph. So I'm just going to explore a little bit more what this $70,000 a week potential cost would give us. So help me to understand, if we were to do something like that, are we looking at this as a daily occurrence or 3 times a week? And what's the maximum capacity of children that we could help per class? And in the makeup of those kids, if we have a difference of need, let's say English language learners, kids of essential workers, or special needs, and we only have one person there without any IAs, and this person may not be a teacher, but somebody else, how's that going to look like? What's the background of the person like? What type of help can they actually expect? And will it really actually make an impact?
So, I mean, it's similar to what we were currently doing for Beyond the Veil, which is working with our McKinney-Vento kids. In terms of support, they're just there. I mean, they could provide some technical support if they feel comfortable with, addressing some of the questions that students may have. They're more than welcome to do that. But, that isn't necessarily the expectation. Again, for lack of a better word, it's almost like a study hall kind of environment, right? You have someone there who makes sure that the kids have breaks. They're making sure the kids grab their lunch. They're dealing with any technical issues that arise. If they feel comfortable enough to address any of the questions, they're addressing the questions. But the primary mode, it doesn't change the fact that a kid is still learning on the computer. What it changes is the fact that this kid is not functioning at home for a variety of reasons. And we're offering them an in-person option, provided that they can follow, the guidelines. So, and that's really where we're at. And I think some of the ancillary benefits are they have access to, they can socialize a little bit. They have access to the fields that they may or may not have. Like, for instance, with Montaloma, some of the families that are over there are military, so they're away from the base, even though their parents are providing transportation. So it's things like that. And it does, Rebecca can talk about the hours. I think the hours are actually a little bit longer in the day for these programs. And so a parent has a benefit on the tail end of the program. It may end at 4 or may end at 5, as opposed to ending at 2 o'clock or 2:30. And so that, you're not getting the full benefit of being in person. You're getting the benefit of getting out of the room, and you're addressing all the other needs, right? So you don't have to worry about, like with our homeless students, you're not worried about power consumption, which has been a concern. You're not worried about getting meals to them because it's right there. You're not worried about internet connectivity, right? You're just providing a more stable environment for them that may help facilitate learning. And then, of course, you have access to other resources too, if need be, that are on campus that naturally aren't there in other settings, right? Manipulatives and other stuff. So that's sort of where you're getting the wins at.
Okay, because my concern, this is my quick follow-up, my concern that, look, I'm not a huge Beyond the Bell fan. I've been to different parts of that, I've been in different schools that have that program, and I've seen the same thing. It's chaotic. The people who are there, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's not my favorite cup of tea, to be honest with you. When I had study hall, it was a little different. Now I sound old. But when I had study hall back in middle school, it was with my sports coach, right? So it was the level of commitment was different. Whereas over here with this environment with Beyond the Bell, it's not like that at all. So I'm a little skeptical, but hopefully we have some options that are not like that or that are better, so that we don't have false expectations. Because I don't want to set false expectations for people to think, oh, here's a workable solution, but yet the effectiveness of it is again called into question, and that's not what we need right now. That's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gutierrez. Are there other trustee questions at this time before we open it up to community comment? Okay, as mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to attempt to do up to 30 minutes of community comments. If you have comments you'd like to share with the board, please raise your hand at this time. In the participants panel, if you open it up, it's the it'll pop up a white window on the right-hand side of your screen, and then there's a raise hand function in the lower right of that. I believe it's *9 if you would like to comment from your phone. Depending on the number of comments we get, I'll have to allocate minutes. And once I do that, I can't go back and allow additional speakers to comment. So if that happens and we've allocated minutes and then you raise your hand or decide you'd like to comment, you'll have to email the board. This isn't that we don't want to hear from you, but it doesn't make it fair if I give people, let's say, whatever number of minutes and then 10 more people show up. So please raise your hand at this time. I'm going to wait a few more seconds so I can ensure anybody who's interested in speaking has the opportunity to do that hand raising, and then I can figure out the minutes allocation here.
It looks like we're up to, if you include the comments that were emailed in, we're up to 14, 15.
Are we doing comments from emails after a certain time period, or?
So these were all sent in to
For the agenda? Okay.
Mhm.
And you have how many of those? Could you repeat that? I apologize.
I have 4.
4. Okay. Okay. Or now I have 1, 2, 3. So 6. It looks like I have 17.
Now you just had one more sign up. So,
Sign up.
or somebody else just raised their hand.
Raise
so
their
you're-
hand. Okay. 1, 2, 3. I have 16. I'm going to cut it off at 16 and give folks, let me see. And we will give folks a minute and a half to speak. I think that's fair because the trustees need time to comment at the end of this, so the folks in the audience know where we stand. Trustee Blakely, I see your hand up.
I would like to make a motion to extend the time for the meeting to 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock, okay.
Are you sure we'll need up to 9 or 9:30?
So just by board bylaw, you only have to extend if it goes beyond 10 o'clock.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Right. So the suggested end time is really a suggested end time until you hit 10 o'clock. And then at 10 o'clock, you must make a decision about extension.
Okay, I withdraw
And
my
then-
motion. Thank you.
So am I still at the same number, or are more people adding?
Yep, still at the same number. So I have the timer set for 1:30.
Okay, well, hold on. Somebody just added themselves. Folks, I know there was a person that was just admitted seconds ago who has raised their hand. There are other people adding, and I'm cutting off right now the number of people who can raise their hands. We've been doing this for about 5 minutes, asking folks to raise their hand, or maybe 3, I apologize. If you have additional comments, please email the board, but we need to allocate these minutes so we can hear everyone who's here and then move on to trustee comments so the public knows where we're landing in this. So it looks
So
like
you're up to 15.
15 hands and 4 online. So 19.
You have 14, unless you have 14 and 4. So,
Okay, I'm going to do 2 minutes each. Okay.
all right, sounds good.
All
Let me
right,
reset
let's
the
start
timer real
off
quick.
with unmuting. Do you want to do the comments first, Dr. Rudolph? I apologize. Is that? I'm
I can't.
Please.
Yeah, let me get
No,
those out the way
please.
real quick.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'm assuming y'all can see the timer.
Yes.
All right, great. All right, so the first comment comes from Mary Ho. So most of the data you state are more emotional than real data. What do you expect will change in January? We will be in the same place as we are now until there's a vaccine. Why is January better than now? Number 2, you also state that you are not health officials and you don't have expertise on making decisions on health, yet our health officials have stated that it is safe to open up with proper safety protocols. Why don't you follow their advice? Second comment comes from Chris Chang. Thank you for your ongoing commitment to everyone's safety. Across the nation, teachers are feeling that their schools do not care about their safety, and MVWSD's commitment creates a foundation of trust and goodwill that will last beyond this crisis. I write to speak of MVWSD's new focus on remote learning. This is a perfect time to provide more options to families. The options below can be added without changing homeroom teacher placements, a major concern to families. 1, allow families to homeschool without losing their 2021 placements, which primarily impacts MVWSD choice school programs. 2, use a virtual team to create asynchronous independent study option. This could be a powerful chance for MVWSD to experiment and with more self-directed learning along the model of local Khan Lab School and Acton Academy. 3, add these without making changes to the synchronous teaching, but let's empower the remote teachers by giving each teacher a second device like an iPad to supplement their MacBooks. Across the nation, dual devices have been transformative. Shifting policy to allow for Zoom breakout rooms will also elevate the remote learning. Is a perfect time to host virtual teacher sharings like unconferences, embracing the local tech community's fun knowledge sharing culture. QSF held their EdTech unconference this last weekend. MVSD can do this internally. 4, support families that wish to form remote learning bubbles. It has been a great benefit for my own daughter to carry out her coursework with one other classmate twice a week in our yard. Thank you for your ongoing dedication. Next comment is from, and I apologize if I mispronounce the name, but it's Philip Beniki. I respect those who choose not to include their children in in-person school, but many children need the emotional support of other children to help engage in their education. As your own data shows, distance learning is not an adequate substitute. From experiences elsewhere, it seems clear that a 2-day-a-week option with appropriate social distancing can be achieved. If you fail to pursue it, you can sacrifice the future of many of your district's children. Please don't let that happen. The last one comes from John and Naja. Dear Superintendent and members of MV Board of Trustees, thank you for your continued efforts towards creating a viable opening plan for our district. Ahead of the special board meeting this evening, we would like to make some comments and requests regarding the option surveys that were sent out to families on September 18, 2020. We hope these will aid in the preparation for reopening. We have a daughter in the 3rd grade, and we found it extremely difficult to make a choice between blended hybrid option and the connected distance learning option. There are many reasons for this, but an important one was that we felt we were not provided with sufficient support information for each option to allow us to make an honest and informed decision. For the hybrid option, if the goal was to send our daughter back to school, even if it was for 2 days, we want to do so with sufficient knowledge that the district has assessed the risk of contracting COVID-19 and have put measures in place to mitigate those risks where possible. Here, we are referring to the logistical piece of reopening plan, which we feel has been missing to date. We feel that the logistical piece can be and should be created for each option you are asking for families to consider. We need to be informed of what we can expect it to look like from the moment we step near the campus for drop-off to the moment for pickup. This by no means is an exhaustive list, but we want to understand what will happen during the school day, including how classroom desks will be set up, e.g. with plexiglass around their desks, with something to mark off space in between the desks, etc. What restroom breaks, recess, lunch will be like. Example, staggered by grades, kids sitting by themselves outside or inside, being able to play with friends or not on the play structures. What instructional scene will be like, will they go to STEAM classroom or will the same teacher go into the classrooms across grades? How will RTI work? Will the same art, music, PE teachers be teaching in person across the grades? We understand that this is not possible nor realistic to expect every piece of the plan to be fully hashed out before actual execution. However, as parents, it will be reassuring to know that you have considered these critical.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. So Dr. Rudolph was just giving the 2 minutes allocation for email comments, and we will start down the list of currently raised hands. Please do, if you have a comment and you have not already raised your hand, feel free to email trustees, but we were not going to be accepting any more public comments since we've allocated minutes already, but we would like to hear from you. We'll start off now. If Sandy Pewitt, you've unmuted yourself. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So very quickly, thank you so much. This is the first district that I've been aware of who has taken such serious consideration of teacher feedback in your return to learn type planning. It's a very strong strategic move because having teacher attrition would be really challenging to overcome when we do actually go back to school. So very quickly, I would like to suggest that the Zoom link be posted on meeting agendas in the future. Tonight's meeting link was on the district calendar, but not on the board agenda. There was a dial-in, but not the actual link. At the time that I typed this comment, which was around 30 minutes ago, the YouTube streaming link was not on live on the board agenda. And so I'm not sure how watching the Zoom are hearing this meeting. Quickly, I'm a PTA president. Regarding the questions about after-school activities to supplement distance learning, the Mistral PTA has historically supported both the Mistral and Castro students with our after-school program, which was funded entirely through parent donations. And I just want to make everyone aware, number one, PTAs have to pay workers' comp for any employees or people who pay directly. And so we have to budget well ahead of time for expenses like this. Number two, PTA insurance has to cover the activity, which is more challenging to guarantee during this particular year. So if you're hoping your PTA is going to provide lots of after-school activities, they need to plan in advance. Without insurance, we're not equipped to handle a potential lawsuit due to COVID, morbidity, or mortality with a contact trace to a PTA-sponsored activity. We need to plan and budget. We have multiple weeks required to do that. We do require some kind of long-term commitment from the district. So thank you for trying to make that happen, Dr. Rudolph and board. And then the total low income and ELL population at the Castro Mistral school site is the largest in the district. And there are other families in the district who may not be McKinney-Vento or experiencing homelessness, but those whose adults may be single caregivers or dual working families with no adult available to supervise children during distance learning. And I beg you to consider those families. All done. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. We'll move on now to Ben Orbach. You have 2 minutes. If you could unmute, please.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you very much. If you can give me a thumbs up just so you can hear me. I'm not sure if you can.
We can. Dr. Rudolph, would you please reset the timer?
Okay. Hi, thank you. Hi, this is Ashley Orbach. Just first to start off and, just echo my thanks for the board and Dr. Rudolph and, particularly the teachers and the parents. This is obviously difficult and an unenviable situation for all of us. But I just wanted to level set on a couple of assumptions that I believe we are all operating under. The first would be that the virus is not going to magically disappear, unfortunately. The second, the vaccine is not
Ms. Orbach, we're having a super challenging time hearing
any scale that we very much agree that
perfect. I was going to recommend the video you turn off because we were having a really challenging time hearing you.
Let me
perfect.
Let me turn the video off to make sure that you have audio. I apologize.
Way better. I just wanted you to make sure we heard you. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't want to take too much time because other people have questions, but I just wanted to, as I was saying, not to repeat myself, but just level set on some assumptions that I think we're all operating under. One being that this virus is with us for the foreseeable future, certainly in January. I don't, unfortunately, expect a change. I think that positivity rates could increase, but they may not decrease much from where we are right now. Dr. Rudolph made the point the other day in the community meeting that it's really difficult when education professionals are asked to. So what I'm asking is, I'm unclear about the January timeframe. What do you expect will have changed by January? If you agree with my assumptions, then it would be the answer could only lead us to not much. If the county and out guidelines that our school meets, then isn't the answer how?
Mrs. Orbach, we can no longer hear you at all, and you unfortunately are out of time. I hope you please email the trustees so we can hear your full comments. It sounds like you put a lot of thought into it, and we want to make sure you're heard, but we're having a challenging time, and I think the public is as well. So I'm going to move on to Marissa Dittmer. If you could unmute yourself, please.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, to you guys and the teachers and everybody. And I really do appreciate that you were taking the teachers into consideration, because I support them 100%. But like Ashley was saying, seeing that in January, chances are things aren't going to change very much. And there's a chance we're going to be connected distantly all year. I feel that there is a subset of parents who feel the rigor and robustness of the distance curriculum is too much for their students. And there seems to be some flexibility, but not as much as I've been told we can have. And so I have students that are doing fine academically, but emotionally they are really struggling being online all day, a kindergartner and a second grader. And so I just feel like I would like there to be some like very clear, if we're going to stay distance for a long period of time, then I feel like we need to kind of reassess the flexibility that some parents might need or desire for their children. So, thank you.
Thank you, Marissa, for your comment. We'll move on now to Susan. If you could please unmute, Susan.
Sorry, I'm switching between two devices.
No, you're fine. We can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I want to say thank you. First, I think everybody is working really hard and everybody has the best of intentions. I do have two kids in the district. One of them seems to be doing okay with the distance learning. The other one's not, and he's in first grade. I also agree that it's going to be a long haul before we can go back to normal and we'll get a vaccine, and rates are going to go up and down for COVID. So are we going to stay in distance only for another year and a half? Or are we going to actually start making some tough choices and tough decisions where we start piloting going back and understand that we will have to have plans to open classes and shut classes as cases come in? Either that or we surrender now and we say, we're just not going to have any in-person learning for the next year and a half. And some of us will have to consider what we do, because my first grader is just, he's going to start hating school soon. And the amount of stress that's happening is not really okay. And so I appreciate that you guys are in a difficult position, but other school districts are as well. They must be working through the insurance questions. They must be working through the teacher union questions. I think both Los Altos and Palo Alto are bringing back the younger students, and not just the ones in greatest need. I agree we should prioritize them, but I don't think that they're the only ones that should be prioritized either. And so what are we going to do going forward? Are we going to be in the same place next August and September? Or are you guys going to actually make these strong decisions, realizing nothing magical is going to happen between now and January? So if I understand you didn't want to copy other school districts because we're different, but at least learn from them and understand how they set up their school year so that they could do it and we couldn't. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on now to Lana Chan. If you could unmute yourself, please.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. First of all, thank you, everyone. I know this is a really difficult time. There are no perfect answers. We're all faced with horrible decisions. Having said that, I do want to say a few things. One of which is the student engagement statistics are quite alarming. When you look at the middle school and also even the elementary schools, at best, half of our elementary schools are flat in terms of student engagement from August to September. At worst, you're looking at, that's at best flat, if not a little bit negative. What will this look like if we actually continue this for the next year, 2 years, indefinitely? Because COVID is not going away. So first and foremost, definitely we have to actually look at plans as to what we can do for the folks that are most at risk. And if that means it's combo classes, I think we should start planning for it now. It's one thing to actually do it in the middle of a school year, we're only a month in. It's another thing to actually do it even before school starts. So I urge the board to make those tough decisions. If it means that the students are actually going.
Oh, I think we might have lost her. Okay, I'm sorry, Anna. Hopefully you'll join back in and we'll give you your remaining minute. If that's the case, in all fairness. We'll move on now to Agnes. If you could unmute, please, Agnes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So thank you for doing the really difficult job you're doing right now, both the board and all the admin team, and everybody who is currently teaching my kids and other kids in the district. I probably emailed a longer comment, but I wanted to, after the meeting, before the district commits to spending $70,000 a day or week on special needs students and high need students, that there is more fine-grained analysis of who is highest need, who actually needs to be back in the classroom. It might not necessarily, so I attended the SELPA 1 CAC meeting, which is the advisory committee for special education in this district and adjoining districts. And some special need kids are actually doing better academically right now than they did in a chaotic classroom. Some kids are actually doing really badly right now, and tossing a high need autistic child in a student hall with an untrained beyond the bell staff member is probably not going to improve things in the short or the long term for that child. So in the current situation, it looks like trying to do everything at the same time is too much. Maybe the district should consider, and I'm saying this with a sixth grader who wants to come back, but is not high priority, and distance learning is working for her. So the pain point for us is fairly low, but she's still socially hungry and wants to be with other kids and with her teachers. She wants to see them face to face. Her needs are not the highest. Some kids are suffering more. Some have identifiable needs documented. Some might not. Some kids who are currently identified as general ed with no specific needs might actually need that face-to-face more than a child who has a 504 or even an IEP. So the district has been very flexible, but I think in the approach, there might be a need to have a graduated approach of who is highest needs and
Thank you,
what
Agnes.
specific solution can fit.
Thank you, Agnes. If you have more additional comments, could you please email the trustees? I need to the other folks that are waiting. Kathy Scheck, if you could please unmute yourself.
Yeah, well, not Kathy, but I'm almost.
Hi. We can hear you. Hello.
Yeah, so sorry, that kind of took me out of my mood here. I just wanted to provide a measure of support for the approach of the district. I really appreciate how thoughtful I think everything has been so far. I can say that we were extremely worried about this school year in the beginning of the year before the year started, and I made comments, etc. And I will say that everything surprised us in the way that things have been going smooth. And I fully understand that this is not the case for everyone. That there's a number of factors, many of which are just simply luck, that influence in that. But I will say that for some of us really appreciate the way that this is going. With that said, I truly sympathize for the situation of many families that are not, they're having a much worse time than we are. Not that we're having a great time, but we can handle. And I would really hope that the district would, let's put it this way. I feel sometimes that there's an attitude, and I come from a different country where things are different, right? There's a certain amount of, once the school stops, it's over for us, and everything that happens after school has nothing to do with us. And to a certain extent, I think we have to realize that these are extraordinary times, that the normal rules don't apply, that I really think there would be a time to relax, to blur the notion of school versus after school, because in the end, the school is a hub that it's very easy for families to connect with each other, and some people would really appreciate that resource. And I know it's not maybe for us, but I truly understand that there are other parents that are in a situation that's much harder. But that said, again, I really appreciate the fact that you're keeping the teachers in mind and safety of everyone in mind.
Thank you. We'll move on now to Donna. If you could unmute, please. Donna, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thanks. First of all, thank you very much for everyone's efforts in making school works in this difficult situation. I have a few questions. I'm the parent of a 6th grader at Grand Middle School. And I feel like the combo classes will work for middle schools. I specifically asked my son, and he said that he doesn't care. Any social interaction with teachers, with peers, is better than nothing. And I feel strongly that my son's social emotional development has been hindered during this school closure. Second, our neighboring school districts has already started schools welcoming kids back into campus. And Los Altos School District actually laid out a schedule to bring different groups of students back to campus before all the groups of students will be back to campus before the year end. So why could they do that while we cannot? And the third question I have is, what is the specific criteria for our school reopening? And it feels like we are just kicking the can down the road, that we kept talking about it, kept taking surveys, no actions, no concrete actions have been carried out. We can keep talking and nothing will happen. In the meantime, our children is struggling socially, emotionally, and academically. And not all kids are affected not all kids are affected the same, some more than other. And actually a significant 40%, 50% of students want to come back on campus.
Thank you, Donna. I'm going to have to end your time now. If you have additional comments, could you please email them to trustees@mvwsd.org. I see Lana Chan has rejoined us. I'd like her to finish her 1 minute of comments where she dropped off, as her other comments are still fresh in our minds. So Lana, if you're there, please unmute yourself. And we noticed you dropped off, so we're going to add an additional minute for you.
Great, thank you so much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Fantastic. So I think just to echo some of the other folks, other districts have figured out a way, and I know that Palo Alto, the teacher said that there is nothing that they could do in order to make them feel safe. If that is the case, then we actually have to figure out as a community what it means for our students for the next year or two in order to actually bridge that gap. I mean, as I asked the survey, and then an actual survey that we could actually publish the results and have that understanding as to what it is that we can do to make teachers feel comfortable, to make parents feel comfortable about going back to school. Like, we can't continue punting this. I'd also like to cite that in New York City, during the height of the pandemic, they opened up learning pods, not just learning pods, they actually opened up facilities on school campuses for their essential workers. They managed to figure out a way to do it safely. Now, we can continue having this conversation in January and then March, but that means that our students are losing valuable academic time with their teachers and also with their friends.
Thank you, Ms. Warren. I'm going to have to end your time now. I'm so sorry. If you have additional comments, could you please email them to the trustees? We're going to move on now to Kristen McGuire-Husky.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Kristen.
Okay, hi. I just wanted to say that I think that the survey design really hindered your ability to capture the flexibility of parents. I think there are a lot of parents who just want to do whatever the teachers want to do. And some parents may have answered questions one way or the other, expecting that their teacher either wanted to come back or didn't want to come back. And the reality is that they don't care so much about coming back or not. They just want to stay with their teacher. I think that there are also a lot of other parents who would be willing to be flexible about whether they did distance learning or not, in order to make the numbers work for the particular grade levels and classes. It seems like if you designed a survey such that you gave parents the ability to allow the district to be flexible with their placement, that you might have a lot more flexibility in arranging things than you did with a survey that just said yes or no. I noticed in the teacher survey, it looked like you did that, and there were a number of teachers who might be willing to come back but didn't want to, or they would be happy to come back but would also do distance if that was what was required of them. And I think there are parents in that situation too, who just want to make the teachers happy and they just want to help the district make things work. So I would request that you go back to survey the parents again. I would also say that it would be nice if you consulted public health officials and medical experts when making these decisions. I worry a bit that we don't really have any sort of clear metrics for what is safe and what is not safe. It seems like our public health officials seem to think that it is safe to go back to school, but the teachers do not. And that concerns me, that maybe the public health officials have some information that the teachers do not. And maybe we need to be communicating with the teachers about what the risks are at the various levels of community
Thank you,
transmission.
Kristen. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but
no problem. I think I'm done.
please send them in. Thank you for joining us and for contributing. We're going to move on now to Madeline. If you could please unmute. Madeline, are you here with us?
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you say something again? It sounded very muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Your 2 minutes. I'll start now, please.
I have a child who is in the medically fragile group, and she's hearing and vision impaired, and Zoom just does not work for her, nor does therapy work through Zoom as well. And so I find myself, feeling very anxious trying to meet her schedule and meet her needs, and also trying to sit there with her and make it as successful as possible. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we could make it a school or class by class basis based on the needs or the the willingness of parents and teachers to bring the kids back, and make it both beneficial for that particular class, because I feel like it's so specific to each class and each family. The other thing that I want to know is, what are school districts like Los Altos doing to bring back kids when we can't do that? Is it a money issue? Is it a PPE issue? I'm not really sure why we can't do that for very specific needs kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. And we will move to, pardon if I don't pronounce the name right, but Mr. Kaushik, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Hi, this is Rakhi. I do want to applaud the board and Dr. Rudolph for standing with our teachers and not twisting their arm to come back to teach in person like some other districts in independent schools are doing. But I would say for the parents and children that are really hurting in distance learning, I wonder if the district can do something to meet their needs, whether it's social, emotional, or academic. I realize it requires more thinking outside the box, but it does seem like the right thing to do. As someone else said, we're in for the long haul, and the virus will not disappear in January or even after the vaccine is released. Whenever that is, I believe a vaccine for kids will take even longer. And I'd like to know, what are we doing? What are we going to do infrastructurally? So with ventilation, using outdoor spaces, being able to open windows, expect plexiglass on individual desks, etc., so that kids and teachers can return safely to school, whether it's in January or March or whenever. I wish the board would spend some time between, I'm sure you are already, but I just think it would be nice to talk about those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Raki. That looks like the end of public comment. So we will move on now to comments from trustees. I see Trustee Gutierrez's hand up. Please, you want to unmute yourself? It's my trick is I keep forgetting.
Oh, no problem. So in terms of comments from our end, you know, I understand parents' concerns. I'm a single dad. I've got my kids for the next, I don't know, 12, 15 days. And listen, I'm on a Zoom call talking about IP litigation strategy and the value of this patent versus that patent and the claim terms associated with such patents. That's not the type of crap I want my kids to hear, right? I want them to be back in school interacting with their friends. Distance learning hasn't worked for us at all, either in our district or in the high school district. Both of my kids are quiet, they're shy, but they're good students. And they're tuning off because it's just sometimes they don't work that way. They need to have social interaction. They need to interact with their teachers and their friends, to ask questions and to hang out at lunch and do things on the weekends and be social, but they just can't. And it's not that we don't understand that. We get it, but this is the reality that we're in. Now, what Los Altos does in Palo Alto, yay for them, right? I'm not that district, we're Mountain View. And the way we approach things is thoughtful and pragmatically, because we're a unified board and we want to work with our teachers to succeed. But we don't want to risk anyone's health over it. And that's the biggest challenge. How do you deal with someone's life in your hands, indirectly or directly? Forget the union and forget the other unions that we have. There's just the humanity of it. And I think that's the biggest question. So for me, when I look at these things and I hear these frustrations, it's like we're going in circles here. We could totally sense that the frustration of the community is there because they want something else for the child that's better than this. I totally get it. For some it works, for some it doesn't, and that's public education. And now we're seeing all these disparities come into play now because of the pandemic, but they were always there. Whether it was a digital divide, whether there was enough time between parents and kids, whether kids that needed help were actually getting that help in their school, at their site, with their teacher, and after school. That hasn't changed. It's just exacerbated because of where we're at. So the questions that we should be addressing right now is, number one, would the community feel better if we just said, okay, from here until the end of the COVID virus, the school's closed? Not knowing what your work situation is going to be like yet. Because I know from my end, I've got permission to stay at home until the end of January, but I don't know after that, right? So how's that gonna balance out? So we've got to look at that too. And the other thing that we need to understand too is, now that we've been discussing the potential reopenings and how that may look like for different schools and different types of students, hybrid models and what have you, now is the time to also follow up with the questions of, since this may be lasting for more than just 1 year, let's get into the concrete specifics of how is that going to look like once we're done and we come back. Because it's not a question of PPE, since we dipped into our reserves for that. And it's not a question of not being able to talk to the unions because we're doing our MOUs right now. It's just understanding that we're all in this together and it's not working. That's the thing. And so you do as much as you can to try and figure that out. It's not that we're punting this. It's that we're trying to figure it out and there's no perfect solution. And that's what stinks. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Gutierrez. Trustee Conley?
Thank you, President Wilson. Yeah, these are the hardest. This is a really hard conversation. I'm going to hit a few points that I've talked about before, but I think sometimes our community is able to pay attention at different times. So some of you may have heard me say of some of these things, and some of you may not. First of all, I think we've had a real failure of government at the federal level around tamping down on this virus. And the way it's trickled down, since there's not a national standard around it, is that we're left with the state and the county kind of juggling back and forth, making the hard decisions. I think we have good public health departments, but I also know there's a significant amount of political pressure on those public health departments. And what I have seen as a school board member, God bless them, is that the state and the county are kind of punting back and forth on schools. And they are not giving us data based on, I would love to see what is my city's rate per 100,000 for the last 2 weeks. We don't get that data. That is what I would use for decision making if I had that data. Instead, what I'm looking at is our overall rates. And, let's talk about Los Altos. Their overall rate to date is 405 cases per 100,000. Mountain View's overall rate to date is 738 cases per 100,000. And in the 94041 school zip code in Mountain View, 889 per 100,000. That is significantly higher. Palo Alto, 452 per 100,000. Sunnyvale, which has decided not to open until January, 643 cases per 100,000. We also know Cupertino is not opening till January. San Jose Unified is not opening till January. There are more and more districts that are taking a more conservative stance. And the districts to the north of us that are starting to edge back in, their case counts are lower. They also, it's a much more affluent population with fewer essential workers, which I think is also why their case counts are lower. So those are things that we need to think about and really work with the data that we have. And I'm very transparent about my thinking. I would like to see a positivity rate under 1% to open up schools. Whether or not that's possible, I don't know. We're all pretend epidemiologists now. If Fauci says optimistically in the second or third quarter of 2021, we might have a more widely available vaccine. I know that's still only going to be going to adults. It hasn't even been tested in a child population, but giving it to adults would still be significantly safer. I don't think August is that we're going to be in exactly the same place that we're in now in October. I don't know what that place will be, but I don't think it will be the same as we are now. And I think by setting goalposts, I want to think of these as like markers along the way where we're going to re-examine and make another decision point. What I think is extremely stressful for everyone, teachers, staff, students, families, is coming back to this conversation every 2 weeks and having it fluctuate. And so setting a goalpost in the ground saying the next time we're going to take a look at the data, we're going to take a look at our MOUs, we're going to take a look at how our kids are re-engaging, and we're going to see if we can get some better health data, public health data from the county. It's going to be in January, I think is a smart decision. And then in January, we reevaluate, we talk about it, we see if we can get better data, we see where everything stands. And it may be that our positivity rate is even higher then because of cold and flu season. We don't know yet, but it's something that I've heard a lot about as being a possibility. So yes, we may come back in January and we may still not be able to reopen when we sit down and talk about it in January. We don't know. But what we are saying is that we're going to have a stable period to really drill down. We're going to focus on getting our highest needs students. And I appreciate the comments around looking at that granular data. Who are the students that really need the most support, and how can we get them at least onto campus with somebody to work with them? We're also going to work on we're partnering with the city. We're in these discussions now to have socially distanced activities for children outside of the school day in partnership with the city that are outdoors, so that we can start to fill up some of that social interaction bucket that like our kids are just, I have an only child. This is a really, really hard time, right? This is going to be called the pandemic generation. This is not how I wanted my child to grow up, but my child's going to be okay because I'm going to take care of them. And our district is going to be okay because we're going to do our best to take care of our children and our students. And so I truly appreciate all of the people who have spoken to us tonight about their needs, because the needs are real and there's things that we need to address, and we're going to keep working on it. So keep giving us feedback. But also when we start looking at other cities and other school districts, we actually need to look at what limited data we have and use that to help understand where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Conley. Other trustee comments? Trustee Blakely? You're still muted, Trustee Blakely. There you go.
Thanks. I was just saying that Devin is so much more articulate than I am, and I concur with like pretty much everything she said. In particular with the positivity rate, and I saw Trustee Wilson's thumb going up, and I there's a lot of little squares, but I think if we could get the positivity rate under 1, that would really make me feel personally a lot more comfortable. I do want to rely on what the public health experts say, but as Trustee Conley pointed out, it is like a football going back and forth, and the political pressure, and there are calls that the county has with elected officials, and you hear one thing on Tuesday and another thing on Thursday, and still, I mean, I expected that maybe in March or April, but I would have thought there would have been a little bit more consistency now, and there really isn't. And I don't see the purple and red and orange levels. I mean, I don't know where the state came up with that, but that doesn't all feel safe, especially as Trustee Conley pointed out, the positivity rate or the total cases in our zip codes are high. That said, I like the idea of the goalpost. Definitely, I think collectively we've been having one-on-one conversations with Dr. Rudolph, but this kind of kicking the can down the road every 2 weeks was just leaving everybody in limbo. And I was hearing from parents that said, look, my kid needs some stability. She just got used to this routine, and let's stick with this for a while. So, I'm hopeful. I know it's hard for everybody, all of you that spoke this evening and that are listening, but let's do our best to try to make it work together. Again, I said earlier, but I would really like to see us be able to do something, whether it's pods or Beyond the Bell, but something for the at-risk kids who are struggling. I feel that's just so important. If there's a way to do a waiver for limited groups of kids that just really need it, like the one caller who said her child has hearing and vision problems, and so understandably Zoom is going to be even more challenging for kids like that, and I want to be able to serve every kid. I'd also like to, as Dr. Rudolph suggested, really focus on improving the distance learning and making it be the best that it can be, and boosting the Wi-Fi in whatever ways we can. I'm excited about that opportunity because I know that Wi-Fi has been a continuing challenge for many of the callers here this evening. It's not perfect. And then the MOUs. My understanding, maybe this is a question for Dr. Rudolph, but is that things are proceeding along, and if we can get those in place in a way that teachers and staff feel comfortable, then we'll be that much further along for when we actually do reopen. Is that correct, Dr. Rudolph?
Yes.
Okay. And we talked about was it Senate Bill A20 that would allow live streaming? Would that be one of the items that we are going to be discussing to be included in the MOU?
Yes.
Potentially.
Well, I mean, you're talking about stuff that's going to be negotiated, but yes, it was something. Senate Bill, just for everybody's frame of reference, Senate Bill 820 did 2 things. It changed the way that you had to require attendance, which is why our attendance process changed. And then there's an old ed code from the 1990s that said that in order to record a classroom, a teacher had to give their permission first. And what Senate Bill 820 says is that under distance learning conditions, a school district can require a teacher to stream from their classroom live. And then the second part of that, though, is that a parent it doesn't remove the fact that a parent can't record. And so that, again, that goes into, if that's one of the options, we're going to talk about what the implications of that will be later on. So, but yes, 820 does allow you to do that by law.
Okay. Thank you. I just think that that might be a helpful solution for people that want to stay with their teachers. When, some would perhaps stay distanced, but still be able to stay with the same teacher while some kids were live in the classroom. I would hope that we could maybe find some solutions like that. So, and just lastly, I wanted to say, we totally appreciate the teachers. I know everybody on this call appreciates how hard our teachers are working, and we want to keep them and all of our staff safe, as well as you and your children and your families. And I just really want to thank the teachers and thank Dr. Rudolph and the whole staff for really trying to listen and come up with, the best solutions possible, given that there's no solution that's really ideal. And I hope we all can keep a sense of humor and kind of stick with things and get through it, and we'll all come out on the other end. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Blakely. Trustee Wheeler, you want to unmute yourself?
Happening. There we go.
There we
Okay,
go.
so as is often the case, I agree with everything everybody said so far. Jose or Trustee Gutierrez, I want to thank you for your, your vivid going around in circles visualization. I think one of the best things about Superintendent Rudolph's proposal is that it provides stability and certainty to our community right now. So I know that, there's some people who are still, questioning this and writing into us and making comments. And I think the stability and the certainty of this decision that lets us concentrate now on teaching and learning. So one community member wrote into us today, and I actually responded to her, and she said exactly what I was going to say tonight, which is, I want our district to be focusing on teaching and learning and not continuing to look at, statistics about this. So let's, work together for the next couple months, see where we are in January. We don't know, some people say, we need to be ready for a long haul, but at least, we can have the goalpost be January. So I think that's a real strength. And the other, along with stability and certainty, the safety aspect. So Dr. Rudolph is, as far as I can tell, a leader in the county talking about the importance of safety for teachers and staff and students. So, like everybody, gee, wouldn't it be great if we could, get our kids back to school? But, just from a foundational level, the safety of everybody is what's most important. So I would like to say two more things. So one is a question and one is a comment. The comment is that I agree with everybody saying that, let's do what we can to, collaborate with the city or whatever groups to try to get some sort of socialization going on after school or something, with, Parks and Rec or something, because, get, cohorts of kids together doing something active or mentally engaging or singing or band or, something. So instead of just sitting in front of a computer. So I would absolutely support that. And I was glad to see that Superintendent Rudolph talked about that at our meeting on Thursday. So, and then my question is, a a lot of us are particularly sensitive to the needs of special ed students, and we're hearing from a lot of special ed parents. It was my understanding, in reading the survey, that a lot of the special ed teachers are ready to come back, and they want to work with their students. And then tonight I heard about special ed students coming back to what is essentially a study hall, which is maybe better than nothing. It gets kids out of the house and working with somebody. But I thought when we said bring special ed students back, I thought we were talking about with special ed teachers on campus. So that's my question. And I would definitely support bringing at least those kids back. A lot of people want their child back, but the ones that need it the most are special ed students.
Thank you, Trustee.
I'd like to hear Superintendent Rudolph's answer to my question.
Please.
Yep. So you're right. Most of the teachers who were in the SAI classes volunteered or said that they would be willing to come back. So I think there are two secondary conditions that have to take place in order to make this a reality. First one is that the MOU has to be in place, or there has to be some type of agreement or understanding that from a voluntary basis, teachers can come in. And then I would argue that, which is what I said earlier, we also want to make sure that there's a continuity, right? That the class doesn't open and close based off of voluntarily coming in and then all of a sudden, I don't want to come in. I'm not arguing that's the case, but one of the questions we have to ask is a secondary question, like if you're voluntarily willing to come in, are you saying that you're willing to come in for multiple, for all 4 days? The second part of that is that these classes often have IAs who are there to provide additional supports. And so right now we don't have any IAs that are willing to, so we're going back to see if it's possible that there are other IAs that may be willing to come in. And so whether or not that could help facilitate the option. And then again, of course, both unions have to sign off on the fact that it's a voluntary basis. I don't want to get into the specifics of what it would look like, but I think for the kids that can come in under these conditions under the SAI classes, you have sort of these support structures, and then if it's possible, and this is where Director Mays can chime in. Ariana, if you want to mute yourself, or it would be the conversation of, could a teacher come in? Essentially, what we're saying is you have the support structure there, which is the sort of the support pod, for lack of a better word. And then the teacher is coming in to provide therapy or instruction classroom if they can, following the appropriate social distance guidelines. But that support pod is it's the buffer that allows that class to continue on. And that's sort of what we're looking at until we can get everything finalized. But Ariana, if you want to talk a little bit more, that would be great.
Unmute. All right, there we go.
There you go.
Yes, just what Dr. Rudolph was saying. Yes, 13 of our credentialed staff have said that they are willing to come in. Of those, some of those are speech therapists, so they don't teach a class. Some of them are vision specialists or are clinical therapists, so they're not in a classroom. But we are looking at how to use these support pods with teacher instruction in order to get our students who are not able to learn virtually back in the classroom as quickly as possible.
So I'd like to end by saying, I know you said, so this isn't going to come back for another couple of weeks to the board, I think, and whether we will actually vote on it or not, I don't know. Your explanation made sense to me, but I would like to say right now in public that I support your approach. So there's one.
Thank you, Trustee Wheeler. Well, I'm not sure what else I can say. You've all covered a lot of my thoughts, but I will start off and thank everyone for joining us tonight. And I'll also start off with an apology for not planning as well of an agenda for last Thursday as I could have. We had a community item that really needed to be heard in a timely fashion that went over, and it just led to us having to have this special meeting because we just didn't have enough time. And so for that, I have to own that and I apologize. But I'm glad to see that we have so many people who have called in and participated to listen to the actual fleshed out, Q&A from trustees, the additional community comments and our comments now. Having said that, there have been a lot of comments about why would January be any different? And I really enjoyed Trustee Conley's description of it as a guidepost. We're really saying, we're not going to come back every week and get folks' hopes up, and our district is different. And so this is the guidepost to see we're going to be checking back in at that time, but it also gives families time to plan. I mean, they may want to make alternative decisions for their very unique needs, and they should have every right to do so. And I think this planning event horizon, if you will, gives them that long runway. I also like to reiterate that we're not voting on this item. The schools are closed. We're not going to keep coming back and saying, oh, should we vote for January? Should we vote for March? Should we? That I don't think that's the appropriate approach at this time. That could change, but at this time, the schools are closed and we've given Dr. Rudolph the power to open and close them. I do agree with everyone who has already spoken in that we must help our highest needs kids. And I'd like to see a more detailed in-depth analysis of who those kids are and how we could approach that before we start getting into the dollar amounts that it would take. I would rather see intentional focused instruction than this sort of MUR based, they're out of the house, but they're just kind of being monitored, as Trustee Wheeler mentioned. So again, focusing on the highest needs kids, but also, now that we could free up the conversation and district time to focus on the gaps that we're now seeing and improving the way we are providing distance learning. We clearly see there's an issue in middle school, and that could be because of social engagement. So to the one, I think it was Donna's comment, and to all, middle school parents and even elementary, if you have friends that you trust and can get your kids tested, and you can do so for free at El Camino Hospital, you can form groups to go out and play in the yard or the park, or if they're middle schoolers, they're probably many are already on social media. So they can get tested and go and have that time together. That's sort of separate from the school. There are opportunities. I don't want you to feel like they have to be stuck inside as a prison. And hopefully most folks knew that their free testing was available to the community. I just want to reiterate that the combo classes, I get that folks are like, just do it, pull the trigger. Again, as was mentioned from teachers who've taught in elementary school. And again, this comment is to the elementary school combo classes. This puts an extreme burden on our teachers that are already overburdened. So this is where I would love to try to make something work, but I really would like to steer clear of that. It could be an option for a new school year, but putting that extra burden on teachers at this time, I don't want to lose our teachers. We value them, we respect them. I've heard comments that, this is their job. Well, my job's not requiring me to go in. A police officer and a nurse or a doctor knows that there is some level of life risk involved in their jobs. And most teachers, they could get the flu, which generally doesn't cause death, or other colds from their kids, but they don't sign up to be teachers in order to be exposed to something that could do this much harm to them or to their families and bring it back home. So I don't go along with that argument, but I respect the different arguments. I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we've had this additional time to talk with the public and to reach out and hope you're heard. We're never going to agree with everyone, and especially on an issue like this, where there are folks on both sides. And if you're super comfortable going back, there are options for you to develop socialization pieces. And I'm really thrilled, as Trustee Wheeler mentioned, that Dr. Rudolph is also taking the intentional approach to work with the city to after school enrichment programs, physical education, likely targeting Wednesdays, which are asynchronous, and seeing how that comes. So it'd be really neat to see in our next, in one of our next meetings, what the progress is on that and what options there'll be for parents. With that said, I don't have any more specific comments. I really agree with everything that's already been said. I do see hands up, so I heard I missed one earlier, so I have to focus with these darn glasses on every little window. Sorry, but yeah, I'll end there. And I don't know whose hand went up first, so I'll let you two duke it out and you can unmute at will. Who wants to go first? Rochambeau.
I'll be quick, and then maybe Trustee Gutierrez can close us out. So before I forget, a couple of things that I forgot to mention. One, I have been really impressed, not just with like the incredible teaching that is going on right now, but like the creativity and the flexibility and the persistence, all of these values I want to teach my child that my teacher is showing my child every single day. And I'm thrilled that I believe we already have an iPad for every single elementary school teacher. So they all have dual screens, and they've been using those for a while now. And we also, they're using breakout rooms. I've heard about Q&As and polls, and they're really exploring all the features of the technology. And so that's something that I'm really proud of our staff for embracing this new medium that we're having to work in. And then I also wanted to give the public quickly just a little window into all of the different ways that the trustees and the superintendent get information. We are in regular contact with the public health department. So for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, the county started a weekly call for public and elected officials. It is a private conference call, and everybody would get on the line, from school board members up through, I heard Kamala Harris's aide on there one day asking a question, right? We're all on there together. Usually Dr. Sarah Cody speaks. There's time for a Q&A. There's updates on everything that's going on, tracking the data. And that information is usually, I think, a little bit ahead of what we're seeing. Our data online that we have on the website for Santa Clara County, that tracker, it's great, but it's always lagging. It's always a week behind. So we've been doing those calls. Now they've spaced out a little bit. Now it's as needed instead of every week. The Santa Clara County School Board Association started out with a weekly meeting as well, where the county superintendent of schools, Dr. Mary Ann Dewan, would come in and give information about things specific from the county for schools. And now that's moved to a bi-weekly format. But I know that Trustee Wheeler, for example, attends every single one of those meetings and passes on that information very faithfully. And the rest of us attend when we can. The superintendents also have a regular call with Superintendent Dewan at the county level. And they also have their own employment at AXA. It's administrative, I'm not going to get the acronym right, but they have their own association for superintendents basically across the state, and they are meeting regularly, I believe, at the county or state level to also get input from the California Department of Education, the California Department of Public Health, our county public health department. So we're getting all that input. I think what's hard is we see that it changes literally on a dime. I mean, you go in there one day and then a week later it flips, and then it flips again the next week. And so what the public may perceive from us as being overly cautious is actually grounded in months and months of experience diving deep with the public health department on this issue and understanding how unstable the situation truly is and how much flexibility it requires. I have friends in other parts of the country whose kids have gone back to school. I have friends who are teachers in other parts of the country as well, and their schools have closed within 3 days or a week or 2 weeks, and then they're trying to figure out how to reopen. And I know that we could do that, but I don't think that that's what's best for our children right now. But that is a really, really hard thing to take in as a parent and have to talk to your kid about, that like, we're not going to go back to school yet. I know that that's a hard conversation. But otherwise, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Conley.
Thank you. So these are the moments when we have to look back to ourselves as parents and individuals and try and think what it is that we can provide to our kids. Each one of us has a different journey. Not all of us are the same. That's a given, right? We're all, in my opinion, made in the image of God, but we're all different. And we all have different things to share and teach. But the important thing here is that in the middle of all this, the portrait of a graduate that we have, that we talked about, this is one of those moments where we want our kids to be resilient, where we need our parents to be like that as well, where we need to exchange ideas like we are, because in the end, we'll be better for it. I don't know if this is going to be a pattern from here on out. Maybe in another year and a half, after we get everything taken care of and we're in a better spot, we'll be in another similar situation. But by then, hopefully, the next board and the next community in Mountain View that will be taking this issue on will have a blueprint about how to approach this from the school district perspective, and at each school site, how will that look like? And what it is that parents can do to help, and what it is that teachers feel comfortable in doing, and what it is that the district can do to facilitate that type of partnership and cooperation amongst all of us, because like I said, we're all in it together. So we can't lose sight about being positive and working towards getting to reopening, but also factoring in that at the same time, we're taking on all these issues like the digital divide, kids who need more attention than others for whatever reason, and all these differences that we have, socioeconomic, that we knew were there all along and are festering out even more so. That's the reality of our country. This is what it is. And now's the time when we have to act together to help one another, to go beyond that and work like a team to try and bridge that difference, knowing that you can't really do it 100%, but darn it, you should try, right? And so if you could just bear with us, this is a learning environment. We're failing forward. We're not going to fail back. And no matter what happens in the end, we will always do what we think is best in the best interests of the kids, of the teachers, of our families, and of this community. So just hang in there. You're not alone, and we'll get through this together.
Thank you, Trustee Gutierrez. Are there additional trustee comments at this time? No? Okay. Then at 8:48, we will adjourn this meeting of the Mountain View School District Board of Trustees. Good night,